Welcome to the 500 Mile Podcast. I am your host, Shane Hayes, and coming up this week, we are joined by the great editor, Keith Fraase, to talk John Carpenter's Apocalypse Trilogy, self-named Apocalypse Trilogy. Once again, I'm joined with Ted Haycraft for this episode.
Yeah, hopefully to the mystery of John Carpenter and his fan base and his critical assessment.
Critical assessment is the key, which I wanted all three of us to do this just because you were watching Carpenter movies as they were coming out, and Keith and I are the bigger fans of it.
Right, and then I keep on having a friend of mine keeps on going, what's the deal with John Carpenter?
Which we bring up in the episode. But first up, what'd you watch this week? Well, we skipped a week, so we have about 2 weeks worth of movies we watched. So.
Oh gosh, I'm not going to go back that far. I can't think of that far. I don't have my notes in front of me, but okay. I will say both of us saw Eternals together.
Yeah, well, that was almost 2 weeks ago.
Was it? And then I saw an interesting film called The Mountain with Jeff Goldblum.
Ty
Sheridan.
They showed that at USI. I wanted to see that.
Yeah, Strozik, a Herzog film. I finally got.
I've never seen that.
That was shown for film class. And then I've been watching some episodes of The Night Stalker. The Kino just released the TV series Blu-rays, and I'm revisiting those. And then
we talked about this a few weeks ago because we were talking about, was it David Chase, or it was on the peak? Chase, it was on the peak episode. We were talking about it.
And then, but more importantly, Shane, I've attended 2 Bob Dylan concerts, and
very cinematic, very very.
Well, no, he's got a visual flair for his setup on the stage, you know.
In the episode, I mentioned that after we were done recording, I was going to go rewatch Big Trouble in Little China, which I did, and Big Trouble in Little China is a movie I watched a lot at my cousin's house, but piecemeal. So, and I've seen it all the way through. I have. But I always forget it. But in the episode you kept talking about, and I guess it's just one of those things I didn't notice as a kid until you pointed it out, but it was so glorious in this viewing, was how much in Big Trouble they are just making Kurt Russell look ridiculous.
Oh yeah,
it is hilarious. Like the most amazing moment though is near the end where he ends up making out with Kim Cattrall and she's heavily made up, and so he spends an entire scene with lipstick on.
Yes.
Oh, that was great.
There's a lot of fun in that, and a lot of it credit goes to W.D. Richter, my Buckaroo Banzai writer director.
One of the cool things I wanted to talk about this week, I probably shouldn't go through the whole list of what we watched in the last 2 weeks. The Long Good Friday I finally saw that for the first time. That was an interesting one. And I saw, have you ever seen...
You know Ellie Gould, Robert Altman?
No, the Bob Hoskins one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right.
Julie Christie.
The guy singing...
not Julie Christie.
Helen Mirren.
Helen Mirren.
The guy singing Upside Down, a sequence. That was always the big visual takeaway from that film.
It was a very... It was great. And I don't think barely anyone's seen this movie. There Was a Crooked Man I saw 2 weeks ago.
Kirk Douglas?
Yes.
Wow.
It's Joseph Mankiewicz's second to last movie, I think you'd be interested in seeing it because it's Joseph Mankiewicz kind of responding to the spaghetti westerns.
Well, yeah, and I might have seen it on TV as a kid. That's been around. That's just one of those.
It's not as square as you think. It's pretty good. It's Henry Fonda too is in it too.
Well, yeah, now that I would definitely go back to it because of Mankiewicz's involvement with it.
There's definitely some squareness in it. Like the score alone, the title is based off the song that they used in it, and that song is reused a lot. But the coolest thing I wanted to talk about this week that's excited me the last few days is Disney Plus finally put out the IMAX versions of Marvel movies, and I don't understand. Very few Blu-rays I've seen, like the Nolan's been good about it for the most part, but they don't put out the IMAX aspect ratio of the movies. And these movies come out 2:35 too, so they cut off a lot of image. So I watched Shang-Chi, which rewatched that, and
are you feeling a difference? Are you seeing a difference?
Come on. We went through VCR purists who were always complaining about the pan and scan, which we talk about on this episode with Carpenter, and you're cutting off near half the image of what they shot if they shot it in IMAX. A lot of these Marvel movies, Eternals is odd in that it's back and forth between IMAX a lot. It goes back and forth a lot. But a lot of these other ones are shot on these ARRI cameras that are IMAX resolution, so the whole movie's that way. So these whole movies are in IMAX ratio. And there's a bunch of movies I want to see along this. Like the one I was thinking about that's kind of a holy grail for me of the last 2 years is Skyfall. Skyfall was Roger Deakins shooting in IMAX ratio. And then the one we see on Blu-ray is full 2:35. You're having one of the world's greatest cinematographers cut off half their image. And I mean, a lot of how this works when you cut it off is you still center your composition with the center, and most of the other parts are headroom. But even on Shang-Chi, I was looking at this, like, you can tell they moved the image up, and where they punched in for the 235 version, they moved it up and down. It's not just center of the frame.
You know, I'm kind of getting a little confused here. Are they shooting with two different cameras? Are they shooting the film with two cameras simultaneously?
No.
Or they're using the IMAX camera, but how can they get how can they work with the ratio, the scope ratio, the widescreen ratio?
They're cutting it off. They're cutting off half the image. They're just
right. So how do they? But then so when you see a widescreen image in the film, that's not an IMAX camera then.
Sometimes it is. Yeah. No.
Wow.
I mean, it's the same one.
How do you do that?
You literally just put black bars over and don't show half of what you shot.
Okay.
That's my point.
Okay, that's bizarre.
I heard Joe Dante mention the other day about a 70, it was a 3D or a 70 millimeter one that they had to shoot two different versions of, and famously, Oklahoma is a Technoscope movie that they had to shoot two different versions of. But we're talking about the same thing, and you're just, and it's.
So what you're agitated, your voice. So what are you proposing that they should just?
I don't see it is very little skin off their back to just show the full aspect of what they shot. I mean, we're talking things like the most popular movie of the last 10 years. So it might be Avengers Endgame. Why are they're now just showing the full IMAX version? This isn't available on the Blu-ray.
So you're saying that's the way it should be?
Yes.
I gotcha.
And I mean, Eternals did this. So it goes back all the way to the Nolan Dark Knight stuff, where they go back and forth because it's a sound issue.
It's a sound issue.
So when these modern ones are mostly shot on a digital camera, high resolution. So yes, you're seeing in the theatrical one where you're seeing the 235, you're seeing the IMAX shot one. But a lot of these people that are shooting on film, IMAX film, that is still an issue, because what happens is an IMAX camera is too loud to get audio, to get dialogue audio off of it. And so have you ever looked at the behind the scenes? And I don't know, I feel like the modern casings have gotten better, because a lot of these like Mission Impossible has figured it out, the Bond movies figured it out, but they would literally go shoot a scene with film on an IMAX camera, and then they'll do another take and not turn on the camera to just get audio, and then use that audio and put it over the shot that they had a second ago, just because vocal rhythms will remain the same.
So, man, I guess I haven't been paying attention. So
I think more people should be paying attention to this. Is my point.
What you're talking about,
or not, nerdlinger.
You're saying that a film. So they're shooting an entire 2-hour film, and with an IMAX camera, and they are masking the lens at certain points.
Digitally, they're cropping it with a letterbox.
That just seems kind of defeatist or silly, or I mean, I'm missing.
Thank you, Ted.
Am I missing something here?
No, or maybe I'm missing something.
What's the aesthetic? What's the aesthetic going on? Why would they do that?
Sometimes, again, I don't know. I find this odd. Sometimes your deliverables, the contracts they have in deliverables, have very specific, we want this in a certain ratio or something like that. But that even still is like, I don't. So
when you're watching on Blu-ray, do you actually, can you see the density difference in an IMAX picture and then a regular?
Actually, that's a question for you. Can you? Because they're moving back and forth on some of these movies.
Yeah.
Because so things like the Marvel movies are shot entirely digitally. So it's the same camera, and they're just cutting off. And actually, you know what? I think I do have an answer for this, because I think IMAX, there was a contractual thing with Disney Plus and IMAX that they allowed to show the full aspect ratio.
I'm the wrong person to ask, because I will watch a public domain or a gray market disc just because I want to watch it. I want to see it.
Okay, sure.
And I've never been a high tech man. I bought a whole.
But you're overwhelmed by a good visual or a rich visual image.
I appreciate it. I understand it. I understand all that. But at home, I rather spend my money and time on acquiring the library as opposed to the technology. And I know
you're a quantity over quality person.
Yeah, basically somewhat. But
somewhat.
The quality of the hardware and the quantity of the software.
Well, but you would never watch. You're not a smartphone owner, but you would never watch a movie on a smartphone,
Oh
would
God,
you?
no.
See, there's limitations.
I would really. I will be surprised if once I break down and get a smartphone, if I ever would.
Well,
do
what
that.
you're also describing is limitations of what's available too, which that's just on a fundamental level. I think now that we're saying this out loud, this has to be an IMAX contractual thing, but I don't understand why.
It's interesting that we're talking about this because John Carpenter was one of the directors that took Panavision and really made a wonderful aesthetic out of it.
Yeah, that's a good transition. One of the things we didn't mention on this that I wanted to bring up is that John Carpenter, I forget where he's from. Is it like New York or Chicago? But he spent most of his early life in Bowling Green and actually went to Western Kentucky before he went to USC.
Our wonderful southern neighbor, the state of Kentucky, the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
And his father taught music there, and that's where he learned a lot of his music theory and a lot of his we talk a little about his synth work and obviously a lot of his composing in the episode, but
yeah, he actually comes back every once in a while. He's been back to revisit it and be honored by them. But yeah, they're Bowling Green. A lot of Evansville people go to school there.
He's a great directors can come out of any region.
Well, yeah. I remember when Halloween came out, and when I started, researching who he was and what this guy was all about, it's like, oh wow, he's from Bowling Green. Wow, we were all kind of excited about that at the time. That's
crazy. Well, Keith Fraase is on this episode. His most recent film that he edited is A Mouthful of Air, which was in theaters, and so we wanted to plug that.
Amy Irving and Amanda Seyfried.
Yeah. So anyway, this episode, John Carpenter's Apocalypse Trilogy. Dun, 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 dun. I think one of the big reasons I wanted you two particularly to do this is, and I've talked to Ted about this before, I'm trying to remember exactly where my opinion on Carpenter changed to him being one of the disregarded bests that everyone just is not paying attention to anymore. I want to give you a little bit of credit for that, Keith, because it would have been around the same time we met, but I can't remember. I remember I had this amazing viewing of watching The Thing on my laptop, and I started it at 4 a.m. by myself in the dark with no lights on. It was like one of the greatest.
That's the way to watch it. That's the only way to watch
it. It is. It's up there with I watched Shining and Eraserhead all on really tiny TVs by myself in the dark for the first viewing, and it was the best viewings of each one. But anyway, my point is Ted was going to the movie theaters at this time. This is the exact type of genre movies that he would have been really to this day defending, saying I was the one that saw it. And every time I bring up Carpenter to Ted,
now let's be straight. I keep on bringing it up for us to discuss because I have a close friend who says, "What's the deal with John Carpenter?" He keeps on coming, and we keep on repeating this discussion, and I keep on trying to come up with some good answers to that.
Well, what's the critique? What is the question?
Well, I think my friend thinks that the concepts are great, especially I think Escape from New York. The concept is great, but the execution is not. It doesn't follow through on how great the concept is by the end.
Well, you also point out occasionally you say the pacing, and it's always a third of a good movie or half a good movie.
I put in Escape from New York just before I came over here, and I'm like, my God, he is just taking his time. And I'm not, I grew up with this pacing. I mean, I'm a Leone buff. I love Leone, and and that's they're talking about his pacing there, and of course John's a big Leone fan. But that's what's kind of that was kind of the thing I think Shane wanted us to do this because I kept on going. My friend keeps on going? What is the deal with Carpenter? And I'm like, well, let's try to figure this out.
Well, and also Keith, to get you into this, you unabashedly I feel like your fandom's grown over the years when you talk to me about it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think So John Carpenter is one of my favorite filmmakers, and I think I don't know entirely where it started. I mean, it started with The Thing. That's kind of where it is. But I think because I don't.
Do you remember your first viewing of The Thing?
No, what's funny is I don't. I think the reason. See, I came to it late. I've always been a big horror fan, but I discovered The Thing late. I think actually the reason why I decided to sit down and watch it, and I think it might even be one of the first Carpenter films I ever saw, was I think I was watching one of those. God, was it AFI or whoever did did like the 100 best scares or 100 best horror movies or one of
Bravo
those
did one. I remember in the aughts. I like
yeah,
that
one
one.
of those things. And I was sitting down watching it and just kind of ticking them down and trying to I was making a list of the ones I hadn't seen. And at that time, it was a lot I hadn't seen. And then the thing came up, and that's where they were starting to show some of the practical effects. And I was like, holy crap, how have I never seen this? So I went and watched it. And I remember loving it, but I don't remember how old I probably was in my early 20s. But the thing that actually made me come back to it and what started my love of Carpenter was so my wife, Allie, she hates horror films. She won't watch them with me. That's why I'm always watching horror films, usually at night by myself after everyone's gone to sleep in my household, because no one will watch them with me.
The way they were meant to be seen.
Yeah. And so there was one year where she was trying to challenge herself during Halloween, during the Halloween season, and was like trying to watch a bunch of horror films. And so she watched like Alien. She watched some old stuff, Dracula and Creature from the Black Lagoon and that kind of stuff. And I was like, well, I remember The Thing being fantastic, so let's put that one on. And I hadn't seen it in years, and we were watching it, and we were about like halfway through, and I was like, holy shit, I forgot that this is absolutely terrifying, this movie. And
you know what? I think I remember you telling me about this. I feel like we were working together when this happened.
Yeah, because once we finished, I basically told her, I was like, Allie, if you can make it through that, you can make it through anything. Because I really think The Thing is probably one of the scariest movies, and I was genuinely surprised by how like nothing scares me when I watch films usually. And I remember how terrified I actually was of that film, and I think it actually goes back to. I'd love to. I mean, I don't know if we want to get into it later, but I do. I have some thoughts about John Carpenter's pacing, because I do agree with you in a lot of ways, or your friend, in that Carpenter has some odd pacings, which I actually think is what makes his horror films so effective. And actually, I still love Escape from New York, but I think his action films are the ones that are the oddest to me. Like Escape from New York is weird because it is very slow and it's oddly paced. And even though the music and the score is incredible, it's that kind of simple thump. But it's not like visceral in the same way.
Well, that's a good point, action films, because I think Escape from New York, the opening and they're in the city and you get to discover the city, the pacing works and it's fine, it's eerie, it's strange. It's when they get to the action climax, it just kind of peters out. It doesn't hold up to the strength of the first half of the concept and the eeriness of being this whole island of New York being a prison. So that's a good point about how he handles action as opposed to atmosphere.
Right. Yeah, he's all atmosphere, which is what I think which again, for horror films, I never really cared that much for jump scares or even that much for gore, but it's the dread and it's the atmosphere and the tone of it all. So that's why I think like, even though they're somewhat schlocky, I find like The Fog is fantastic, or Christine, like all those films really, really work for me because they have kind of this slow atmospheric pulse to them. I think that like, and when you see later Carpenter, like even though Carpenter's one of my favorite filmmakers, I think Escape from LA doesn't work at all. I think I actually just recently saw Ghost of Mars. And I thought it was terrible.
Which Ghost of Mars, I didn't realize was apparently originally. I think I knew it back in the day was supposed to be a third Escape. It was going to be this.
Right.
There was a rumor. No.
Well, I had heard the same thing that basically if Escape from LA had been successful, there was going to be Escape from the World, and it was going to. I think there were elements that were taken over because Ghost of Mars was also kind of a remake of Assault on Precinct 13, or at least a remake of Rio Bravo, which Assault on Precinct 13 was kind of based on. And I shouldn't say Ghost of Mars is terrible. It's just it doesn't work for me. Because I think the action parts of that, it has a lot of action, just aren't. Yeah, they don't work in the same way that some of his stuff, his horror works for me.
With the unfair thing to me, especially rediscovering him, is that thing of why do certain directors, especially ones that have made money in the past, and especially ones that like have their old movies that didn't make money supposedly refound, and everyone's like, oh, this was, especially with The Thing, is like, wow, this is a great movie. Why doesn't anyone like act on that? And like, because I mean, Carpenter ostensibly retired after Ghost of Mars, and then he made The Ward, and he was doing some TV stuff, but for the most part, even now, like even when these options come up to him, he's just like, I'm scoring with my son.
Well,
Like,
he's getting up there in age too. He's he wasn't as active, but that's interesting that you said that, because I'm thinking the films that he had a studio behind him, and he had a studio budget, and he had all the access to studio stuff, are the ones that didn't make money.
yeah.
That all didn't do well at the box office. His early stuff, his independent stuff, Halloween was one of the most blockbuster.
But did the two after Big Trouble in Little China? Did they?
Well,
they were cheap, but...
those were low budgets.
Yeah.
The Prince of Darkness and They Live was Universal released it, but they were on a low budget called Alive Films did those. Yeah. So, and Carrico actually released them in Europe.
Well, Keith and I were talking about this beforehand, because I thought there was a third one, and Keith was saying it was a series of 4, and that's why he went to do.
There was supposed to be more, and then they got in trouble. Universal wanted more, but they wanted to control the European rights, take them away from Carrico, so it became just a huge mess. So it all fell apart. The Alive contract all fell apart, even though those two guys from Alive, their names are on the Village of the Damned, but they didn't do anything with it. So it's just a big mess.
Oh, interesting.
Well, we thought that he went back to the studios with Memoirs of an Invisible Man.
He did. Well, that was a studio thing. Yeah.
But I'm saying, like, we thought the allure of the studios would brought him back out of the thing. But I mean, that sounds like that's not the case.
But he was going to do more for the Alive. Yeah. And Christine was a work for hire. It wasn't his choice. He was working on Firestar.
Yeah, no, I knew Firestar. Firestar was a movie I
then he just took Christine, just because he needed a job. Because I needed a job.
Well, then Firestarter fell apart, right? Because of the Thing being a financial and critical disaster. I think. It was like
Bill Lancaster from The Thing. I know he did some drafts. I forget if he's credited on the actual finished Firestarter, but. All right, essentially for this episode, we are talking about John Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy. Now, from what I can understand, this is a name he came up with. This isn't some critical thing that... A lot of time these unofficial trilogies, someone else names them and the director will take them up later.
Let me give I actually read this somewhere else. I was reading an article, and apparently he brought it up himself in a Wall Street Journal interview.
How long ago, do you know?
I didn't get the date down on it.
I mean, no, I've seen him mention it multiple times, and it's pretty plain. He just says movies I made that were the apocalypse.
Which I think is kind of funny, because I'm always thinking, when you first said this, I was like, well, The Thing it's kind of a lopsided trilogy, because The Thing is so big and great, and the other two are just kind of interesting.
Here's where I know I disagree with Keith. I don't know if you're with me on this. I mean,
I think In the Mouth of Madness is an outright masterpiece, and it's one of those things where I had, In the Mouth of Madness, actually, I should say, and I love Prince of Darkness too, don't get me wrong, but it's slower and weirder and smaller. But I will say that In the Mouth of Madness is, I wanted to correct something I was saying earlier. I actually think that might have been the first Carpenter I ever saw, because I remember seeing it when I was like 15 or so, and I don't remember anything else about it.
It would have been the first age I saw my first Carpenter.
Okay, Keith, let me throw this at you. Okay, so I drew out this whole chart that it tracks my movie going with Carpenter. I was just a diehard Carpenter fan from the get-go with Halloween, and then I brought in Dark Star at campus. I was at college. I brought Dark Star in to see it so we could have a chance to see it. My friend had HBO and Cinemax, and early on, and he had his own apartment. I didn't have an apartment. He went to work, but he let me go to his apartment when he was at work and watch Assault on Precinct 13 for the first time. So I was right there just gobbling up Carpenter, and I'm with him all the way to Big Trouble. For some reason, I don't go see Prince of Darkness, and I don't go see Mouth of Madness at the theater.
Yeah, and you were telling me earlier, Big Trouble is your favorite of his.
Well, The Thing and Big Trouble, yeah. But I mean, yeah. We'll get to that. I have 3 favorites of his, but I don't know. I've been racking my brain and trying to articulate this with Shane. Like, I go, why didn't I see these films? Was it because of the reviews, the box office? I was busy with something else going on, or I was already tired of John. I don't know why I would be, because I love Big Trouble. So I don't know what happened.
I mean, they were also kind of dumped, weren't they? I mean, like, I feel like I know that In the Mouth of Madness was like barely released at all,
New
or
Line put it out in like February, I think, of '95.
I think the only reason I came to it was because at the time I was like a Sam Neill fan, and I was like, I'm gonna go see this because of Sam Neill.
Well, I'm a big Charlton Heston's in the dang thing, and I grew
Yeah.
up on Charlton Heston, and I don't know why, but
I-
anyway.
I was going to say, Keith, to round us all off, I mean, obviously The Thing is my favorite of these, but Prince of Darkness, my first viewing of that, I was just like, that's where I was like, I think because I hadn't seen In the Mouth of Madness since my teenage years, I was like, oh, I think I'm full into this apocalypse theory trilogy thing. Like, these are, Prince of Darkness is that thing, I don't know if it's the atmosphere, but something in the synth, but there's this, the term apocalypse applies to this. You feel like the world is ending in these movies. The sense of dread is so thorough, but at the same time, it's still Carpenter's leanness of storytelling. He's so to the point on this stuff. That's where I'm just not with you guys on the pacing thing. Like, it just feels like he's taking his time to build this stuff, but which I guess maybe isn't completely disagreeing with what you're saying.
Well, I'm not. I'm not trying to. I don't know if it's, I'm not trying to be critical or one way or the other. It's just he's got a very, very particular pacing that is very distinctive of him. I think of all his peers that's out there.
Well, Keith, the other thing I was going to mention to you, I was looking at these Vulture articles about it, and the observation. Well, first off, the one thing I kept checking in the middle of watching these movies was, I think the source of why I would disregard Carpenter, and I think a lot of people around us, Roger Ebert hated John Carpenter for some reason, and it was always this backhanded where he gave all three of these movies 2 stars, I think.
Yeah. I mean, everyone hated The Thing. That's the when I discovered that,
That's the weirdest thing,
which I didn't find out till recently, was that not only was it, I can understand these things being box office failures, but the fact that critics like savaged it is just insanity to me. Because like, I mean, you look at the thing, clearly it's masterfully put together, or
Yeah.
like, it has like, I mean, it's hard to kind of deny it on its even just technical achievements.
just
but-
the high budget bleakness alone makes it like worth. The point I was going to make in the Vulture article, though, is that I think you might be the same, but we would have watched these on VHS. Pan and scan really screws over Carpenter. If you're cutting off half of his compositions, because Carpenter's compositions, I mean, the meat and potatoes of him is the love of, I think he was only done 2 movies that weren't 2, 3, 5. So there's all of these anamorphic, a lot of steady cam shots. His composition is just, it's not even that it's like this masterful thing. It's just so distinct. You know a John Carpenter frame when you see one.
Right. Which is, I find it so interesting that, like, I agree with you that it is his compositions, and I don't remember seeing these things in Pan and Scan, but I'm sure I must have. How I first came to it. But what's weird is, like, it is that VHS culture that actually was the first to elevate John Carpenter as a cult status, I mean, beyond just Halloween and stuff, because, like, his films, I think they almost all unanimously bombed at the box office for more or less, except for
After
Halloween.
like The Fog, you mean?
Yeah, after those films, and I guess Christine did well too, but they got the kind of second life on VHS, and which is crazy to me to think about it, because I mean, most VHSs like at the time were all just the full screen pan and scan stuff, which, like we were saying, is destroys his carefully crafted compositions. I can't even imagine watching Prince of Darkness on in the 4:3 box, because it would make it seem, because I mean, so much of that film is built around, like, I mean, it's all small spaces, small, church hallways and stuff like that, but he makes it look so grand and massive. Even though it's only got the $3 million budget, he makes it big, look so grand. Because of his,
there always feels like there's
framing.
2 things happening in a frame at a given time. There's definitely an A/B in almost every frame. I'm trying to think of what I didn't see Prince of Darkness in 4:3. I might have seen the Alice Cooper video on MTV, but so do we want to go through these chronologically? We want to start with The Thing.
Sure.
When did you first see The Thing, Ted?
I had a friend who was a manager at a theater, and we did an early morning screening. Me, him, and Jim Alexander. We sat in the front row, watched it by ourselves. At one point, the manager next to me, his legs started shaking because he was freaking out so much, because the film was just freaking. Was such an intense film. It is a masterpiece, and it's one of the, I have no problems with The Thing, as far as I can even think.
I watched some behind the scenes for the thing, and the one thing Carpenter says, besides the fact that it's the film of his that works the best, is that it seems like the one that he had the longest pre-production on. I think it's his most expensive. Big Trouble in Little China was more or less, or
No, his most expensive is Escape from L.A. because that was like $50 million.
oh, well, he said this is the one he had the most pre-production on, that he was able to figure some stuff off. Although Escape from LA, that makes sense, sadly, unfortunately.
I mean, it was his studio film. It was like his big studio break. I remember that. So definitely by the time it was his biggest budget.
Yes, and I thought that it was hilarious. I do have one little thing about the thing that cracks me up is he finally has a budget for music, and he hires Ennio Morricone because he loves Ennio Morricone, and then what does it sound like? It sounds like a John Carpenter score. I mean, and he didn't use all of it, so I thought that was kind of weird. But he said he had fun giving him money and being able to talk to him and meet him and work with him.
The thing, Keith, you and I can relate to is that I think this came out during Hateful Eight. Was the majority of what he used of Morricone was the stems,
right? Because I think I remember because Morricone would just like didn't really know what Carpenter wanted, and so he just sent a bunch of stuff. And I think the only note that Carpenter kept giving him was less notes. I want less notes. And so eventually Morricone just like, all right, I'm just going to give you a Carpenter-esque score, which is a wonderful score.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
yeah.
If you look, I looked it up. It was nominated for the worst score at the Razzies that year.
Oh, the Razzies continuing their tradition of not knowing shit year after year.
Yeah, but
this was shot by Dean Cundey, who had shot, I think did he start with Halloween was the first one?
Yeah, he goes back to Halloween.
But Dean Cundey shot Big Trouble in Little China, but this unionized him, and after this he goes on to shoot Romancing the Stone Through Death Becomes Her for Zemeckis, including the Back to the Future trilogy and Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Jurassic Park.
It's very strange that my cutoff going to the theater to see Carpenter is in sync with his change of cinematographers. I don't know if that makes any. I don't know if there's anything there. Cundey, Kibbe becomes a cinematographer after that for everything except for Invisible Man. Up to Ghost.
He stayed with them the whole time.
Yeah.
Well, he did somebody. I thought there was somebody different for there because he does. Dean Cundey does the thing, and there's somebody different. I think for whatever's next. Was it Christine and?
I thought he tried some new people for a while.
There's one other person he tries, and then he goes back to Cundey for Big Trouble, and then it goes to Kibbe.
Okay.
I think that might be correct.
Because I listened to a little bit of, we'll get to Into the Mouth of Madness later, but I listened to a little of their commentary, and it was him and Kibbe. I think it was Kibbe shot In the Mouth of Madness, right?
Yeah, Kibbe shot Prince of Darkness and In the Mouth of Madness, yeah.
All it was him talking to Kibbe. He's like, how'd you light this? And he's like giving film school lessons, like tell them what a 10K is and stuff like that in the commentary, and he's talking about framing.
Yeah. It looks like a guy named Donald Morgan was the one who shot Starman and Christine.
Yeah, Donald M. Morgan. That's Christine, yeah.
So Christine is beautifully shot too. Starman I haven't seen in a while, but it is. I mean, that's one of the weird things about the Apocalypse trilogies. Like in terms of linking everything together, like really the only thing that links them all together is that sense of dread that we keep talking about, because most of the crew is different. Like there's not like obviously Cundey doesn't doesn't carry over, and I assume it's not Bottin who does the effects for In the Mouth of Madness.
I don't think it's him.
Yeah,
because ILM has a credit on In the Mouth of Madness. I found that funny.
Oh really?
Yeah, there's a few CGI effects, but Rob, yeah, that is, I mean, and the thing about the thing is that is career making effects. That like around that time, it's what 2 years after American Werewolf in London, and like Rick Baker and Rob Bottin and
Nicotero, so the special effects
right, that's right.
Yeah, Howard Berger, Nicotero.
It was K&B because
Robert Kurtzman.
It's right before From Dusk Till Dawn, like a year before that. But my point is, Stan Winston around that time. That was we have a mutual friend, Brian Schofield, who's really big into the early 80s body horror. And like, that is just a renaissance era for that. And the thing is rewatching it the other day, it's just a marvel how ambitious it was to do this stuff, to think that this stuff was going to feel fluid and like real and tactile and moving, like not just like a sculpture. And like some of it is the sound, like the sounds are so fucking effective on this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's one of those crazy things where you look. I mean, I look back on a lot of Carpenter films, and some of it's just like novelty or nostalgia or whatnot. But you look back on The Thing, and those. I mean, so I will probably. I feel like I probably watch The Thing in its entirety once every 2 years or so.
Okay.
But I will go back probably every couple of months and rewatch certain segments of it, or just check it out on YouTube or something like that. Just rewatching, obviously, the spider head part or the blood test part,
Right.
because I think that those effects um, are still so. It's I think that's something that blew my mind every time I come back to it, is this notion of like they never age to me. Like they still seem like they actually went and found an alien, and that's the secret to it. Like, it's not rubber and goo and plastic. It's actually um there's yeah, I can't ever get tired of it. It's kind of insane what they did.
And per the American Werewolf in London's transformation sequence, the Thing follows this suit. Is these are all kind of brightly front lit stuff. They aren't trying to hide some. There's a lot of these effects that are in the shadows, but a lot of them are not. They're straight head on. I was the exact opposite. So after I had that viewing on my laptop, which would have been, I was probably the same age or late, maybe a little later than you, Keith. I was late 20s when I finally tried to do my renaissance with Carpenter and watch The Thing. I couldn't watch it for years afterwards. And I think I snuck in a YouTube clip that had all of them combined. And I was just like, nope, gonna be a few years before I get back to it. It's just so effective.
Well, what I forget, I mean, just to kind of go back to I want to talk a little bit about the how The Thing is structured and the pacing of it. Just kind of go back to that kind of thing, because I really think that is like the ultimate miracle of that movie is how it's paced and how it's put together. Because like I was saying, I do go. I'll revisit the film. I'll watch the special effects sequence, but I'm just rewatching the film again for preparing to come on and talk with you guys. I forgot that what makes the movie work so well is like you essentially have three sections to the movie, right? And like you have the first section where like you're trying to kind of figure out what's going on. Obviously the great opening with the dog, and then from that it sets the question of like, what the hell is happening? And then the part that I always forget about is the incredibly strong middle section. So there's the middle section, there's the third section, which is where everything goes batshit crazy, and we all remember that, and it's wonderful. But like the middle section is actually, I think, what makes this movie the masterpiece, which is it's the that's the paranoia section, where they realize that any one of them could be the Thing. They don't know who it is. That's where the effects really aren't happening. This is all happening before essentially the chest opens up and eats the guy's arms.
Yeah.
There's that whole section where everyone's just kind of theorizing about who could possibly be infected with this thing, and there's a lot of distrust going on. And that's when Kurt Russell gets the command of everything, and everyone's kind of like, and he and Keith David are starting to butt heads a little bit. But I think it really is that middle section that gives the heart and soul to this film, that gives the metaphorical power of it, which
Well,
is
you do start out with the dog effects, so you do have the dog effects to give you a little bit of a like, this is still kind of bizarre and disgusting, but yeah, you're right. This whole second section is the character building, but also character building the paranoia building too.
right. And that same kind of I will just say, I think that same kind of structure, where one of Carpenter's best attributes is that he always knew kind of where to put the money, right? Like he knew where,
Yes,
like he was very,
very
very
much.
good about like knowing that, okay, I have a small budget. Like I really think that like Prince of Darkness and even in the Mouth of Madness, like you don't see the constraints of the budget that much. Maybe a little bit with Prince of Darkness, but even not so much. And I think it's
I see
because
half of that was the fun for me
yeah,
too.
and I think it's because he knows that like you're gonna have this big third act payoff, and anyway, that's where shit's gonna go wild. And I think that's what happens with each one of these films, is that that's where he throws the money in the effects, because like in the Mouth of Madness, everything goes. That's when all the crazy stuff starts happening, where you see all the crazy effects. Prince of Darkness, like you don't really, nothing really happens up until like the very third act, where all that kind of stuff. So it's all building up to it. And I will say, I think that's one of the reasons why something like Escape from New York is the same kind of thing. It's a sort of slow build to the third act, but without everything going batshit crazy. It like Escape from New York kind of builds to a sort of I don't know, action sequence kind of climax that is sort of a little anticlimactic, I would say. Um, and I feel like it doesn't have the same thrust that these films have, which is in their third act where the chaos all happens. So I don't know. That's kind of my theory as
It's
to why
almost
these
like they've
films.
been building
Wait,
towards an apocalypse, you might say.
yes. So I think in a way that structuring is what makes this Apocalypse trilogy work so well for me.
I wanted to mention my now I watch this movie usually, maybe yearly. I got before this, my last two times of watching this have been with my teenage nephew, who when I showed it to him for the first time, we put on an EPK of how they made the movie afterwards, and I forget. I think it was during the dog transformation. He turned to me and said, "This is the greatest movie I've ever seen," and it was just he was clear he was into the creature effects. But so anyway, I watch this movie usually semi-yearly, and the theory about this movie that has dominated my last watches, probably not, especially this last one, not the most productively, is a few years ago, Dean Kundi, the cinematographer, came out and said that if you rewatch the movie, whenever in lighting, besides all the traditional 3 point lighting systems. One thing Hollywood traditionally does is they always have, I think it's called a beauty dot. It's the dot that's in the top of your pupil and in your iris. There's always a dot in the background, that a light that's trying to get that out. Kundi came out and said, if you want to know who we tracked as being the thing in any given scene, it's who doesn't have a beauty dot. So anytime you watch someone's eyes being obscured in darkness, and this last viewing especially, I was just like, I almost started reverse engineering, because the last few ones I've really been trying to all right, who at what point? And this last one, the rules went out the window for me, so it was hard to figure out. Because it also reminded me a lot of the other great Summer of '82 sci-fi movie that didn't make money, Blade Runner, has the very famous lighting effect of whenever you're trying to tell who's a replicant. And there's the one scene where it shows on Harrison Ford, and so Ridley Scott said that, oh, that was I meant that on purpose. He was supposed to be a replicant. And the thing is, the lighting effect, both in the Thing and Blade Runner, is just inconsistent. But for the most part, it works on the Thing. But I really, really noticed it in the very last. I've always noticed in the last scene where it's Keith David and Kurt Russell looking at each other. You can tell one person doesn't have light in their eyes in that scene.
Is it Keith David or who is it?
Should,
I mean,
should.
Kurt Russell always sort of has a twinkle in his eye, so I assume it's impossible for him not to have that.
I was gonna leave it for suspense, but of course, no, it's Keith David. Keith David doesn't have any light in his eyes. But I mean, even as early in the movie as one cool, I last few viewings, like I said, I reverse engineer who the Thing is. One of Wilford Brimley's first scenes where he's doing the autopsy on the alien, there was this really cool surround effect I'd never noticed before, where you hear a heartbeat, and it's almost like the dead thing is alive and getting to Wilford Brimley at that point. But then there's that really famous shot, which a lot of people pointed out, was after Blair, Wilford Brimley's character, gets abandoned to his shack, and he's gone for a while, and they come back to him. The shot, besides that, it's very clear there's no light in his eyes in that shot. So, but even if you don't know that gag, very in the mise en scene of it all, in the foreground, right next to him is a noose.
Yeah.
So it's like he killed himself, and the Thing got a hold of the body. Is the implication I always took.
That's one of my favorite moments in the movie. Just the fact that it's not explained. No one even reacts to it. They just open up the little eye hole to start talking to him, and there's just a noose there.
And he's talking so calmly too. He's just like, he's not even, definitely, he's like, I'm good now. You can let me out.
Yeah. That's one of the things I realized on several rewatches is what was going, because you assume when I first saw it, I was like, oh shit, he's gonna. You just assume that he's preparing himself. He's gonna kill himself before letting the Thing get to him. But then you realize in hindsight, oh, never mind. The reason why he's acting so calm, even though he's clearly preparing to, he at one point was clearly preparing to kill himself, is because he's now been infected at some point. I think the fact that the noose is never discussed or mentioned or talked about is one of the clearest signs of how the strength of this movie. It's just one of those things, the Carpenter things of where you don't. I mean, so this is talked about ad nauseum, and in the circles that we run in. But the problem with so much horror, both back then and nowadays, is the over explaining of things. The over everything that's mysterious is talked about. I mean, not to go off on a tangent, but like I really like Mike Flanagan's work. I think it's very strong and very powerful. Except that his series, the series that I watch, they always go on way too long. And by the final episode, he's explained everything that he so mysteriously set up beforehand, and it becomes not scary anymore. And I feel like the fact that one of the Carpenter's strong suits is he just throws things in there that are never explained, never talked about, never fully even addressed, and that's what adds to the mystery and dread, overall dread of the films.
And yet, to your point, that maybe the second act or the second section is the part that like really elevates the material to this. This Carpenter is a good writer himself. He's a really good writer filmmaker in terms of writing for himself and writing leanly for himself. But this might be one of W.D. Richter aside, one of the best scripts he's worked with. It's Bill Lancaster, and like Bill Lancaster's two big claims to fame as a screenwriter are this and Bad News Bears. And the writing on this isn't
and he's
the
Burt
explanation.
Lancaster's son.
Yeah,
That's the other claim to fame.
Yeah, Burt Lancaster's son. And all the writing isn't the explanation of this. The writing's character, and also, but also when you heard Lancaster talk about this, a lot of the scenarios he was interested in were the like paranoia-inducing stuff. The what is going to make someone distrust somebody else. Those scenes were the ones that he was most interested in writing and brought him to the script.
Right.
Because the scripted apparently, like Thing from Another World makes an appearance in Halloween on a TV, and it was a Carpenter favorite, but like the studio had been trying to remake this for a while, and they for a while even had like Carpenter says Tobe Hooper was involved for a long time before he was involved.
Right. Have either of y'all seen? I've never seen the original Thing from the Other World, so like I don't have any reference.
You know what, Keith, our old boss, it was a favorite of our old bosses.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he told me he said there was there's a big famous scene in there, and he said that was one of the scariest things he saw as a kid in a movie.
Right, because I mean, it's a Howard Hawks film, right?
Yes,
Howard Hawks produced it.
Well,
it's kind of unofficially directed. It's kind of a Tobe Hooper, Spielberg on Poltergeist thing, right?
Right. Yeah, it's pretty much acknowledged that it was Hawks directing, even though he, is it Kenneth Tobey? Is that the actor's name?
Oh, I don't know. Well, I find it. I was going over this stuff too. I find it fascinating that you mentioned Rio Bravo in regards to Assault on Precinct 13 and him remaking an ostensible Howard Hawks movie. Howard Hawks, as great a director he was not the most visual directors.
Yeah, I figured the way Howard Hawks would get mentioned when we talked here. I was going to say the great thing about Hawks is the critical assessment is that his themes are so strong, and he can do any genre. But I what you just said there, I don't see a strong visual sense with Hawks.
But Carpenter could do any genre too.
Yeah.
But have you looked at the list of movies he almost did but didn't? Like Santa Claus the movie was one he almost did. Or the one that I found,
John Carpenter?
Yeah, he thought the script was bad and he wanted to rewrite it. But the one I would have loved to see that, like apparently they left on good terms, but he almost did. He was talking about doing Exorcist 3.
Oh, what made him not?
William Peter Blatty was kind of very felt. It's the conversations he would have had with Friedkin about the original. Only he had the clout to win this time, so. I mean, Carpenter and him said they got along really well, and they left mutually on it. But
right. I mean, I will say that one of the things I also just that I'm conflicted about, but I also really love about John Carpenter is his sort of attitude of being kind of the journeyman sort of director that he will. I mean, you look at something like Shane, I told you I just recently watched Memoirs of an Invisible Man, which I think is an example. Actually, I would argue and say that it's a perfect example of why I think John Carpenter is a great director, because he is. That is not a great movie. I think it's a perfectly serviceable movie, but the fact that he has the fundamentals and a capability of jumping to sort of any sort of. I mean, obviously he jumps in throughout genre in like his sort of all of his famous films. But even just doing this, he's as a director for hire, he's still so capable and able to make a perfectly cohesive and enjoyable film, even though it doesn't have his signature touches. Um, but I just love that sort of attitude that he has. It's kind of the John Ford attitude, which is like, yes, of
Yeah.
course you're an auteur, but the way he views it, he's like, this is why I put the camera here. I didn't think anything behind it. I just thought the light looked nice or something. Or he's like, we framed it this way because we had
Even
to.
when he's writing his movies and doing the music to his movies, he still has that journeyman mentality.
Yeah, well, he's always saying that the only reason why he did the music was not because he felt artistically drawn to it. It was because he's like, I'm the cheapest guy who can do it the best way. Like he's basically it's a cost saving device for him.
He has
and
he has that funny story on Precinct 13 where he's like he only did the music in one day and none of it was to picture.
yeah,
Jesus.
it's wild to think about all that. And of course, now I think you look back, I mean, he's obviously, we've talked about, he's retired and doesn't seem to have any sort of interest of going back to filmmaking. But I do know the thing that he's most excited about, or I don't know if it's what he's most proud of, but he talks a lot about his scores. Like he will travel around and, perform his scores live. And so I think it's something that he's finally embraced. It's something that he's very proud
He
of.
used to perform with his son was a big thing, right? Well, my issue is like, what would he have been with money more consistently? Like, we know the movies are going to be beloved after a certain point. Maybe the box office wasn't there for him, but
I think Starman is another good example that he can do big budget support, and it's a flawless film as I'm concerned. I think Starman is super strong.
You can see up above me. The only two Carpenter movies I own are Starman and The Thing.
And he can hold head to head with Spielberg on that. I mean, with the I adore Starman. I think getting back to these big budget films, it's funny. Ironically, my three favorite films, and I think they show how a good a filmmaker can be, is The Thing, Starman, and Big Trouble in Little China. To me, the other films, there's great stuff in them, but either they peter out, or they have a budget problem, or something else going on, or whatever, or work for hire. To me, is my three favorite.
Well, the Vulture article made a point that I found really fascinating, which is probably explains why these movies age well, but sometimes, at least in I know Carpenter says maybe this is the reason why these movies don't make money right away, is one of the defining scenes of Carpenter's career was the scene that he was always going to be coming towards again and getting away from. And Keith, I kind of want to get your reaction on this scene, is the ice cream scene in Assault on Precinct 13. Because the thing is, I was watching this. I watched it on YouTube yesterday again. I hadn't seen it forever. First off, I forgot how funny it is, or not funny, but the girl gets killed on screen while the person that he's stalking gets killed off screen, and then it's an 8-year-old with a squib on her chest.
Oh, it's fucking horrifying. It's it's one of those things. So here, I love Assault on Precinct 13.
You as a parent is what I'm always curious about.
Well, that's the thing. Is and I've talked to you about this before, Shane, about how I have a lot of trouble watching children die in movies.
There's a lot of parents I've heard say that they just can't watch movies with kids.
It's one of the things that kept
anymore.
me from fully embracing Hereditary. I was even though I know that that's the point of that movie, I'm just it's so hard for me to watch. It's
okay.
Just watching young children being dying like that. And so Assault on Precinct 13.
I'll temper my recommendation for you on Hereditary. I'll stop bugging you about that for a while.
Yeah, but with Precinct 13, I don't know. I can't decide how I feel about that. It's that's another one of those movies that I had seen years ago. Didn't remember it that well, and watched it actually recently, like a year ago. Which is, of course, that's since I've become a father, and so it's a lot harder for me to watch that kind of thing. And it's a film that I really enjoy on a lot of levels. But I actually think that's one of those decisions that I wonder if he would make again as an older.
He's flat out said no, he wouldn't.
Yeah,
he said. I heard him recently in an interview say he wouldn't.
It feels like a young filmmaker kind of sort of, I don't know, it's salacious for the sake of being salacious or something like that, just to kind of because it's a plot device to get the thing.
Yeah, but it's effective. It's totally no effective. One does. I don't. That scene works so well for me, and as a childless, heartless cinephile, but it's just no one has. There's all these rules in Hollywood movies where you just know certain people are safe, and it really lets you feel like not everyone's safe in this.
Well, it also, it does something that, again, one of the things that I love so much about Carpenter's films is his sort of desire to, he seems to be obsessed with the notion of like pure evil, right?
Yeah,
Like
this comes out in this trilogy too a lot.
yeah, well, all the gang members in Precinct 13 have no nuance to them. They're basically zombies, right? Or obviously Michael Myers is just the embodiment of pure, or unmitigated evil. The Thing, like, just wants to devour and destroy. Like, all these things are just like, they have no nuance to them. They're just a force for destruction, right? And there is something like I forget the guy who plays that character who shoots the girl in Precinct 13. He's also in Escape from New York with the guy with the massive spiky hair in Escape from New York. I forget his name. But he's amazing. He's like, he's only, because he dies pretty early in Precinct 13, but he sticks in your mind because I will say, as horrifying as I find that scene, it's very effective. Like, you do immediately, like, oh my God, all the rules are thrown out the window. The stakes are immediately raised. Anybody can die. So I do find that moment to be very effective. Although actually I will say, like, for me, the most effective death in that particular movie is the one that you don't see. The woman, there's that woman who's like freaking out in Precinct 13 who I forget who. She's also in Halloween, but she's freaking out. She wants to leave, and then during that, they have that massive shootout where like goes on for like 10 minutes, and then at the end of it, the smoke kind of clears, and they just look down, and she's dead on the ground.
Okay.
And it's a horribly shocking. It's probably the more shocking death for me. Maybe it's just because I knew that the little girl was going to die, and that's one of those things that stays in your mind. But upon a recent watch, I'm like, oh my God, that kind of like just, oh, she's just dead. She's just gone,
The randomness.
Yeah, the randomness of it all. Again, adds to that sense of overwhelming dread that I think he does so well.
The ending of The Thing, like, I think to me, I think Prince of Darkness is even maybe it's the over religiosity of it is more bleak to me, but because it's, even though it's a sci-fi movie, The Thing still doesn't have any of that into it, so I guess it is a little more realistic that the way the apocalypse is going to happen. But
one article,
more bleak.
One article said this trilogy has to be pretty grim when The Thing is the most fun to watch.
He's just started this idea that this is what kind of the fight against putting the audience's face in bleakness is what maybe is the reason he didn't hit Spielberg levels.
Right.
Well, they always say, you got to have that happy ending to help the box office, and obviously these don't have happy endings. And some of them have vague endings, or vague.
Yeah, I don't like that logic, but whatever. I mean,
and I've actually never understood that logic at least when it applies to specifically horror films, because I think it is the vagueness of the endings that allows the horror to continue past the ending of the movie. That's why you return to The Thing. That's why you think about it, is because like it reverberates. If everything is like knitted up or sewn up tightly at the end, then it kind of like it ends with the film. But all of these movies sort of like they reverberate out because of the vague endings,
All these movies live on in your mind after you watch them.
Right. And it's a reason why like none of them I've never seen the sequel to The Thing, and I probably will never will.
Same.
Or I guess it's a prequel. It's a prequel. Never mind. But if they ever made a sequel, I wouldn't watch it, just because I think that's the whole thing. Is like because he ends all of these films on a question. It's the same reason why Blade Runner is so great. Like the actual answering of whether Deckard is a replicant or not is you don't want that answered. It's like explaining a magic trick. You don't want the trick explained to you. You want the question to be.
Who'd make a sequel to Blade Runner then, huh?
Who would possibly do that? Who could possibly try to do that and try to tackle Dune as well?
Well, I mean, the test of time is what proves these films, and proves that vague does work, and the non-answers work, as opposed to the films that do get wrapped up in a nice bow and nobody talks about him anymore. Here we are talking about Prince of Darkness. We're talking about in the Mouth of Madness.
Can we move on to Prince of Darkness?
Sure.
One last thing I want to say. Sorry, one last thing I want to say about the thing before we move on. I do think perfect casting in that movie. That is why that movie is partly so fun. It's because none of those characters have any specific defining traits to them, but they're all interesting people to look at.
Has anyone ever written anything about It's All Men there?
Oh, I'm sure someone's written about it. I mean, that's kind of, I mean, it's a very, I mean, the masculinity aspect of it is kind of what makes it. Like the fact that like you have all these testosterone, like hard grizzled men in a tight place together, not trusting one another. Like that's what like makes it the bottle, the powder keg that it is.
Okay. I mean, I think there's some centerfolds in the background, but like sex is not addressed in the movie. So like it's like you said, it's like powder keg, but can we talk about Prince of Darkness now? Because I think I'm going to be the one. I think I'm going to be the only one. Really, we can keep this short, just because. But I mean, the thing's obviously amazing, but so much of the like handmade feeling or the low budget is what makes Prince of Darkness work for me. The single location, like in.
First of all,
Ted, you just watched the Prince of Darkness for
just last night or the night before. No, 2 nights ago I watched it for the first time.
What'd you think?
Well, first of all, I thought that was really. I was laughing how extended the opening credit sequence is.
I counted it 10 minutes and 25 minutes with the intercut titles.
I'm just like,
it's how long? 10 minutes and 25 seconds. You said?
That's pretty freaking amazing. It was kind of fun. There's a couple of weird things I thought happened. Okay, the container that contains the evil down in the basement of this church, it's dripping upwards.
Yeah.
Now, that to me seemed kind of confusing because didn't they see the liquid up there on the ceiling? Nobody was commenting on that.
They're not very good scientists if they don't notice that the jar of Satan is dripping upward.
Yeah, that kind of I thought that was a kind of a silly. I could have been addressed easily. And then the other thing, I mean, I'm just going to get this out of the way because
go for it.
The other part was they start digging through the wall to get the dentist done, out of the closet.
Yeah.
And then we go away to another scene. We come back. Now they're all going out the window, and they've just stopped digging on the wall. Totally, nobody's digging to the wall. And then they're trying.
I thought he got through the wall.
No, this is. He goes out the window and he has to come back in the window. James Barkinson, what's his name? James, what's the main actor?
I'm not remembering.
Jameson Parker.
Yeah, Jameson Parker. They actually goes out of the window, and it's like and then we go back, and then they're back walking on the wall again. I'm thinking, my gosh, they gotta get this guy out of the wall. So I thought it was like an editing mistake. It's like a really strange, out of order.
Did you see this? Because I thought that sequence. Because I remember there's a nice messiness of where he tries to go out, and then it's into that side.
That's in the middle. They started digging on the wall. And then they go to that scene, and then go back to the.
They're trying to dig out of the wall to get him with the rest of the group,
right?
At that point, and then still try to find an escape route out.
But there's nobody digging. Everybody's working on the window sequence. There's nobody. I don't know. I just anyway. Like I said, no big deal.
I remember he's in that closet for a long time.
Yeah,
that is one of the parts of the movie. It's a weird part of the
movie. There's a
day-night
transition there. Yeah.
Oh my God! Now this is happening. Oh no! Now it's getting worse. Like he's basically the eyes and ears for the audience. But I'm okay with that sequence because like everything that's happening on like. Everything that's happening with the woman on the bed is so crazy, but his part in that is a little wild.
It's no big deal. I just thought that was, because I'm watching this for the first time the other night, thinking we're going to talk about it, so I'm keeping a very close eye on everything, probably too close. And I was just like, what? But the thing about it, I watched Moth of Madness. Not to jump ahead too quick, but I watched that just recently too, and I probably watched it too close. So now the more I think about these two films, the more I think about going back to seeing them. I think I'm going to enjoy them more and more as they go along.
Okay.
Go ahead. Back to Prince.
Keith, how do you, this is the weakest of the three for you?
Well, yeah, it's not, I do think I put Mouth of Madness ahead of this, but I will say it's probably my third favorite Carpenter, just because again, like there's these, and I didn't see that until this year. That's the newest one for me. I saw that for the first time about 6 months ago. And I think that I mean, it's so funny because like I think what does it for me again is entirely atmospheric. Like I love the feeling of being in the church, like the key going into that door, going downstairs, finding the jar of the anti-god or whatever they're going to call it. There's something about the feeling of that. And like, there's like, I mean, so much of the movie is just them sitting around talking about these grandiose, like, things like what could this possibly be. And I think there's something about that does resonate with me so much, even though if I will say like, yeah, certain things about the film, like the characters are kind of indispensable. I mean, aside from like Donald Pleasance and Victor Wong, like I can't remember really anything about any of the other
There's
like,
definitely a slasher movie characterization of
which is
everybody.
almost a comment in the film itself, where they keep on referring to the one girl, radiology glasses. They don't they can't even keep track of themselves because they're just so nondescript characters.
Yeah, they're all interchangeable. I mean, they'll have like one, like you have like the main guy who's got a rockin' stash, and that's basically like his only like defining attribute.
The rockin' stash is the first thing I wrote down. Yeah.
But I think, but there is something just about like I mean, yeah, you just said it, Shane. It's a slasher film. It's a slasher film that kind of sneaks up on you, but because it involves the sort of a theory, the sort of doom and like there's something when religion and science meet, and inside that meeting there is horror. I'm just a sucker for that kind
I
of shit.
think the big thing for me is you commit to it. So it's like I mentioned earlier with The Exorcist, but Drag Me to Hell's another movie that fits in that, where like I believe in hell for a movie, and so it's going to scare the shit out of me.
I think the whole talking part and the concept and the climax where she's trying to drag her father, the devil's trying to drag his father out of the mirror. All this, I think, is great. I could actually easily get rid of the usual gore attack tropes that it almost seems like John's expected to put those in there for the horror.
Do you mean when they're attacking each other?
Well, just like the guy gets killed by the bicycle.
Sure.
And then there's another one outside where he falls apart. The body.
No, that one works.
Well, but when he got attacked,
the bug effects work really well.
The bug shit is amazing.
Oh, I fucking love the bug effects.
See, that stuff's great, and there's no real, and it don't go to great lengths to explain it. It's just happening.
Yeah. The bike thing is, I think to a certain degree that anytime I hear people talk a critique of this movie, it's all goes into this areas that I've forgiven the movie for, which are budgetary and things like Alice Cooper being involved with this movie and him stabbing somebody. It's like, oh yeah, I guess.
Well, that's why the bike thing is in there apparently. So Alice Cooper is the one who. So the bike stabbing, it was something that it was like a gag at one of Alice Cooper's shows. And they he had the prop with him. So Alice Cooper, his character is the one who stabs the guy with the bike. So that's like why that happens.
But it seems like some of the jump scares in Carpenter's films, I could easily live without them because there's so much other cool stuff going on in them. And the concept also is interesting that this is really, if the religious folks out there, listen to this, the whole idea about Jesus being an alien is really outrageous. But there's nobody, because it's in a horror film, nobody cared to protest it. And then, Scorsese gets in trouble with Last Temptation of Christ. They got, protesters. I mean, this is just as outrageous as Last Temptation of Christ.
One messes with gospel, the other is science fiction, apparently.
So, well, this is also genre schlock.
Exactly. Yeah.
Take it seriously.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that's what makes John Carpenter such a secret weapon and a secret auteur, is because he's working in the realm of genre. People can just dismiss him when really he's actually getting in these kind of this movie is full, I think, of some pretty dense, heavy ideas. They're not all fully explained or thought out, but they're in there.
It goes to your point earlier about pure evil existing. So Carpenter's basically designing these movies to get away with pure evil. You don't need nuance on some of this stuff. You want the idea that this Satan is the alien Satan is the bad guy in this movie, astrophysical alien Satan.
Right.
Well, one of the things you said, one of the cool little things that he throws in there, I love that whole broadcast. The dream broadcast thing. That's a nice little thing, and it keeps on tweaking it.
And it's such a cheap, nice effect too.
And that adds to the wonderfulness of the ending.
The ending is the part that I find Okay, so Keith, you've heard me rail about this. I don't think I've done it too much on the podcast, but back in the day, I used to be the biggest Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan, and like of the show. And I thought the filmmaking in it was severely underrated. And one of the best episodes in there from season 5 is this episode called "The Body," where it suddenly turns into a major character dies, and suddenly it turns into like 4 Ibsen plays. Like it gets very this genre show suddenly gets very straight, has a very existential episode about what death really is because his character dies. So they're all like, does it have a soul in it or is it the body? And the very final shot is it. What happens is there's a scene in the morgue where they encounter the dead character and like they encounter the body and they're just like, one of the characters says, is that her? And she goes, no, it's the body. And then he goes, well, then the other character goes, well, where did she go? And the last shot of of that episode, it took me until I finally saw Prince of Darkness to realize rips off the final shot of Prince of Darkness because what it does is it's a finger, middle or medium close up of a finger going towards an object. In the Buffy episode, it's the body. In Prince of Darkness, it's the mirror. It gets close to touching the mirror and it cuts right before it touches. And it's such an effective poetic thing to do. Because what's also funny is if you watch the Prince of Darkness trailer, they show you the full shot where they cut out before the end of that shot, but what the very final shot in the movie, he touches in the trailer as it plays out in the trailer, he touches the mirror and then the mirror explodes, and that's in the trailer.
Interesting. Yeah, I think Carpenter is a master when it comes to the endings of his films. Like I think people talk often a lot about how like his films just like there's no like denouement, like it just like they fucking end at like the climax, like Snake Plissken like walking just like fucking like walking off right after the president gives his speech and like with the tape thing, or I mean, well, these films are great examples where they just like they almost end at the climax pretty much, or at least they're all ending on. I mean, we talked about the vagueness, but they're all ending on a question. Like the ending of this particular movie doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like what's happening? Like why would he be able to go to the mirror? Why is he even thinking about that? Like there's not a whole lot that like would prompt that, but it doesn't matter. It's such an evocative, like what the hell is going to happen, and cutting out right before anything happens is such like, he knows that like each of these films in the Apocalypse trilogy leave off on that kind of question of, okay, what comes next? And I guess the answer is the end of the world in each one of them. But but I think that's what I think is so interesting about this ending is that if you really try to drill down and try to think about it, like I'm not exactly sure if this
well the movie resolves
all adds up.
The movie resolves and it basically is milking this what might feel like an arbitrary romance in the center of it. Like, oh, it continued on because they fell in love and that's the reason he's going after it. But it's also, as you were mentioning earlier, the characters in here versus the characters in the thing, not as strongly defined. So, right. I get what you're saying.
Man, I gotta say, my favorite. I think the other thing that one of the reasons why I love this movie so much is this movie kind of feels a little bit more like a playground for Carpenter to this do kind of weird shit that isn't explained.
He seems like he's having a lot of fun and inventing a lot of stuff here.
Yeah, like a lot of it's just like the bugs is weird, like the random homeless people who just kind of keep like standing around are kind of weird.
Shoot some big guy in a video with a backlit smoke, and that's Satan, and then shoot that, put that on TV and film that.
My favorite thing is the performance. I can't remember the guy's name. The guy who stabs himself in the neck.
Yeah, that's an interesting whole sequence. He goes to that mirror, and we're never really told. Is he fighting it? Is he going with it? He's staring at the mirror. It just goes on and on. Just he's in the same room where Donald Pleasence is hiding, and it just goes on forever. And you're like, what is he doing, standing there, kind of laughing, crying?
The laughing, crying.
Well, I really think that I feel like what Carpenter figured out is like, this guy's got an amazing laugh. Like his like crazy laugh is amazing. I'm just gonna make him do that for half the film.
Yeah, and
it's super effective. At least for me, I was like, that guy's terrifying to me, and I have no idea why. Yeah, that's one of the things that I feel like they were just kind of in this place and like having fun and like, let's just do this because it's fucking weird. And who knows what it means, but it's weird and it's effective and it works.
Yeah, I mean that's sometimes I have a problem with that. Sometimes I don't. During with horror films and supernatural films, you could pretty much just gives you a license to do anything and get away with it. And it's interesting how each of these people are affected by the liquid and how the liquid gets to them. It's not consistent.
It's not consistent. I will give you that. It's definitely not consistent.
There's no consistent concrete law. Like, okay, you gotta spurt it at them, and then they do this. Because, like I said, he goes to the mirror and just kind of stands there, trying to laugh, cry, whatever he's doing, and then the other folks are just standing there waiting for the guy in the closet.
I think I'm heartened by the idea that you're going to watch this maybe in a few while and forgive it for its flaws and love it.
I didn't have I never really had a problem with it. Actually, I think I've gone into it knowing these reputations on it. But there's a lot. There's a lot. I love that. I love the opening with just the audacity that elongate that credit sequence.
I do want to mention, because it is, I don't think it's in the Mouth of Madness, but Carpenter had the same font for almost all of his titles for a good 5-year period, if not longer.
Right. Just that white on black text kind of thing. That's super. I think it works. So he managed to make it work so well because his themes are always so like powerful, and they have like that like in your face melody. Like they're simple. They're melodic to a weird extent, and they're pulsing. I actually,
they always seem like rhythm sections.
Yeah. I mean, I knew I was going to love this movie from from seeing the title sequence, because I don't think it isn't just like the ballsiness to do a 10-minute title sequence. There is something about that is actually I think it helps make the film start off on an unsettling tone. Like there's something like, because like it has that kind of pulsing sort of score that's happening during under the entire first 10 minutes. You don't know how long it's going to go on for. Things are interrupted. Like they keep interrupting the scenes with the title cards. And there is something about it that's...
Music dies out at one point too.
Yeah. Oh, during the
it starts and stops in the middle of a scene.
Yeah. Well, there's something about those rhythms. Again, going back to his rhythms that are very unconventional and kind of strange, that to me start this film off in a very unsettling way, which continues throughout the film. Like this film... even though I don't think this film is as strong in a lot of ways as Mouth of Madness or The Thing, I think I'm more unsettled by the whole tone of this movie. There's something about it throughout that I just like. It feels like it has the feeling of a grainy VHS that I picked up off like the curb and put it in without knowing what it was, and it was like shown a vision of something.
I'm with you to the tone of it. This movie feels like Satan's in it at some point,
And it's also nice, a nice change of pace. Typically, the bureaucrats, the scientists, and people in charge are kind of like, have a really bad disbelief. They don't want to work. They think it's silly.
They got a lot of cheap skepticism.
Yeah, and you go, no, we're going to stay over the weekend, and we're going to get all this equipment together. We're going to work it out and check it out and look at that. I thought that was kind of a nice.
Even if they aren't the best scientists, they're good grad students.
Yeah, it was a nice little change of pace there. I did like there was like, this is just a very throwaway thing, but I noticed at the end after everybody stepped into the mirror, Dennis Dugan gets out. Dennis Dunn. He actually just runs off. He just runs away. And I thought, oh, that's cool. I mean, because, usually everybody has to get killed or stay around to talk or whatever. And he just runs away. And then I go, well, that's kind of a chicken shit of him. But then no, next time we see him, he's called the cops. He's back at the scene with the ambulances and cops. I go, oh, that's a nice little touch.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, would have to admit that if many of us were in a slasher movie, that's what we would really do.
Well, that's what, but it was nice. He didn't hang around, didn't talk. He just ran away. Get the hell out of there, So.
Oh, I was saying one thing I will say about the film that did actually break the spell a little bit for me was actually seeing all the cops and everybody arrive, and like they take Donald Pleasance away in the ambulance. And I was like, because all of a sudden I was like, holy shit, like 95% of the people in this building just died.
Yeah.
How are they going to explain that?
Oh yeah.
It's ostensibly downtown LA, so it's not like anything that's happening to the homeless people are going to bring the police down there. So.
And is it just me, or does Lisa Blount, her red hair looks like a wig? I don't know what that hairdo it just didn't really work. I like Lisa.
Oh, see, I don't know. I
You
mean,
like-
I can maybe see the wig, but no, the red hair.
Well, no, I don't mind red hair. It just looked like a giant wig on her. I don't know why. It just kind of didn't.
Her first like 3 scenes, I think she has 2 lines, so
Mm.
there's that. But
I remember feeling that she was an odd choice for the main like female character in this, only because she doesn't really. I actually find like all the other women in the movie to be kind of to stand out more. Like the one with the glasses we keep talking about.
Yeah.
She actually has like something about. I mean, she's possessed, I think, longer than everyone else, but she has like a way about her that is very fascinating and interesting.
again,
And
I
then
think
also
this is me forgiving slasher movie. Have your 2 Aryans at the male lead and female lead. So even though she's got red hair or wig,
well, actually, both her and the dude with the stash are probably the blandest of all the characters. Like they don't really
no.
do anything. They're, I mean, maybe that's the point. I don't know, because I can almost completely forget about her in the movie until the final moment when she's like, where she goes through the mirror. Which I will say, I don't want to let this movie go. Stop talking about this movie without me saying, I do think that the shot of her reaching for the mirror on the other side of the mirror, like when she's in the water or whatever it is, might be one of the most unsettling images in all of Carpenter's career.
It's what's it? Orpheus. Who's the it's
Cocteau?
It's Cocteau effect of
Jean Cocteau.
Yeah, the liquid mirror on the side stuff, and like he was doing those.
Is that you mean the stuff of like when they're putting their hands through the mirror, or you're talking about like having the liquid on the other side of the mirror?
I think both of them, both the mirror stuff. Like the specifics I'm talking about is the other one of the putting the liquid into the mirror, but on the other side using liquid to deal with the reflections of water too. Because I mean the sound effect's also an underwater effect too there.
Right, yeah.
Well, I think I agree with you on that shot. It's pretty crazy and amazing, but I think it was interesting too. He doesn't linger on it. It's just like he throws it to you real quick and then pulls it away from you.
It's a clever idea.
And you're like,
it's a showy, clever idea that he, like you said, doesn't linger on.
I rewound it several times. There's a couple of like things in here that like, it also reminds me a little bit of like, there's that moment in, we haven't talked at all about Christine, but like for me, Christine, when the car's on fire and like runs over the guy, like that's also like another, like that movie isn't one of my favorite of him, but I'm like, I will sometimes just go back and rewatch that scene because that moment is so haunting and powerful to me. That this is like that kind of moment for me where it's such an evocative shot. I think like the other day I was on a walk and I just started thinking about that shot because it was like, it terrifies me. It's only up there for, like you said, like for 2 seconds. But it like, it's a thing that kind of it stuck with me so long after first watching this film. Just the notion of a person on like the wrong side of reality trying to get back, and like that way is shut off. It's fucking terrifying.
Yep.
And so it's especially for a genre movie to come up with a lo-fi effect that has a poetic resonance to it.
Yeah. Oh.
Do you guys want to do In the Mouth of Madness now? I think
you guys... yes. Mouth of Madness. I think The Thing has now, we mentioned a little bit about how The Thing was reviled upon release, but like, it didn't take too long for people to come back on it and realize that it's a masterpiece. And I don't know what the consensus is around these films now, but I think In the Mouth of Madness is a masterpiece. I think it's like an out and out, like I love it from top to bottom.
Its reputation is definitely coming back. I think people are coming more to it. Well,
there's also this. It seems like, I don't know. Do you guys feel this? But it seems like we're getting more and more of a resurgence of H.P. Lovecraft. Well, we had the TV series, but there seems to be much more Lovecraft in the air now.
And I think
all of a sudden
that leads to its resurgence. Well, because going back to the Ebert reviews, I was telling Ted about this earlier. Ebert singles out Stephen King, but doesn't even mention H.P. Lovecraft. And to be fair, I come to H.P. Lovecraft in a little different way, where like I've read very little of it, little but not a lot. But one of my favorite comic book writers, Alan Moore, just retired from comics a few years ago, and his last 2 significant works are basically about H.P. Lovecraft. And In the Mouth of Madness and his last works have a lot of overlap in terms of explaining and synthesizing H.P. Lovecraft, where a lot of it is about the going insane, maybe a writer writing about going insane, which turned into a meta commentary of the document you're reading or watching plays into it. The thing that I think in The Mouth of Madness gets better than any H.P. Lovecraft I've seen, which I haven't seen a lot. I haven't seen a lot of the Stuart Gordon stuff beyond Reanimator, but the magician's trick of reality, where you're using film tricks to like completely change out the rules of a universe or the physics of a universe, but in like an optical illusion way. Like this movie gets that better than any of the H.P. Lovecraft I've seen. Like Color Out of Space didn't really have a lot of that in there.
Right. Yeah, I don't come to this movie with I've never read any Lovecraft. I've never really been that like I haven't even been that like inspired to go read Lovecraft. I mean, I find the monsters and the kind of that sort of stuff very interesting. But I think I come to this film much more from I mean, I love Stephen King. I kind of like that kind of aspect of it is much more interesting to me, like the sort of like evil taking over a small town kind of a vibe.
Well, you can forget about Stephen King because Sutter Kane outsells them all.
Yeah, that's right. He outsells the Bible even.
Yeah, that's what they say in the movie.
And if they don't read, well, there's the movie.
There's a movie. That's sort of I mean, all the meta stuff is wonderful. I think, and also I will say, I think the reason why the Lovecraftian aspects of this work so well, from what I know of Lovecraft, I know, like, I mean, obviously I know the thing that like with Lovecraft that people love about him so much is like the horror being indescribable. Like you can't actually film it because you can't describe it. You can't even think about it. And there is something to the way Carpenter holds. I mean, we've talked about this before about where he knows where to put the money, because he ends up holding off the big reveals of the monsters for so long.
Yeah.
And then he doesn't really super reveal it either.
Oh yeah, they have like the fucking wall of monsters
that
you see for like a split second.
It's
this one as opposed to The Thing, most of these monsters are in shadows, and they are very typically Lovecraftian tentacle based monsters too.
But I love the fact that I love that it's a tease. And then yet he doesn't. You think he'd give us a money shot? He doesn't give us a money shot on him, really, in a way.
There's something so effective. I mean, I've watched that sequence several times, like over the past month, just like the when the monsters are finally revealed, and the thing that I think is so effective about it is you have Sam Neill kind of like staring off into the void, and you have the woman, I forget her name, but she's reading the novel, whatever, like, and she's narrating what's happening, and she's talking about him seeing these horrible sights, and you don't see what he's seeing, you only see his face, and the fear and terror on his face prepares you to be terrified for whatever's going to come, and then what comes, you only get glimpses of it, and you know it's horrifying.
Well, even the reverse shot on that shot you're talking about, in between the page that's been broken out, is for a long period of time just a black void. Like it takes a second for the whatever light fog coming out of it is. One unsung hero I need to mention of this movie, which I don't think I noticed, this is my third time seeing the movie, and I didn't realize it until then, is this movie is written by Michael DeLuca. Michael DeLuca was the head of New Line for years. He was the guy that greenlit like Boogie Nights and Magnolia, and he's been a studio head for like Paramount and Sony on top of New Line, and produced a lot of great movies.
You know how young he was when he wrote this? He was 22 when he wrote this.
He worked at New Line. He started out at New Line, the house that Freddie built, and I guess he tried to get Carpenter to do this in the 80s.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because he knew that Carpenter was the guy, and like I think they sat on it for like 5 years or something like that. It's so weird because he was the head of New Line, and that's why like he was eventually able to get Carpenter to do this. But it was so weird that they eventually like dumped this.
Was he head of New Line when this movie was made?
He was, yeah. And yet they still like like I said, like they dumped this movie, which was so strange that he had written it and Carpenter was doing it, and they just like threw it. But I wanted to look a little bit more into this notion of like Carpenter working with these really young guys, because Rob Bottin, however you pronounce his name, was also super young when he did The Thing.
Yeah,
the guy who did the special effects for The Thing. He was also like 21 or 22.
He'd done some work on The Fog, but this was his first solo thing.
Was Howling after The Thing? He worked on Howling?
No, Howling was before The Thing.
Okay.
But I don't think he did Howling by himself, did he?
Probably not, but he's behind the Howling.
I thought Howling was Rick Baker was the lead on
No,
that.
Baker's on American Werewolf.
No, I thought he was on both.
I
Maybe
don't
not.
think so. They were dueling werewolves.
I think Bhutan was on Howling because Rick Baker was supposed to do that, then went to to American Werewolf and London or something like that. Anyway, I don't know if there's anything to that, but I think I just didn't know if like as Carpenter's getting upwards in years, like him working with these young guys, or maybe that might just be coincidence, but there's something I always thought that was so strange that you have these two guys being like the seminal parts of these two masterpieces being so young.
Well, doesn't that speak to making sure to be a good collaborator, even though like Carpenter, I mean, it's what being a good journeyman is like making sure to bring everything in. I find the Lovecraft aspect to this too is that, I mean, if DeLuca thought that Carpenter would have been a good Lovecraft person, like there's certain elements of like Hammer horror that Carpenter showed love for, but I don't know if there's anything showing Lovecraft except for the fact that at the Mountain of Madness, which was supposedly Lovecraft's masterpiece, the best version of the film of it, until Guillermo del Toro makes his version of it, is The Thing. You know, it's the monsters in the Arctic.
Yeah, I think like I said, I don't come to this film with much of the Lovecraft thing. It's more just like this notion of I think what makes this film so effective. I mean, okay, it all hinges on Sam Neill's performance. I mean, it's just a magnificent performance of somebody who is so desperately trying to cling on to reality and refusing. Like, you know, I love the fact that he's set up as somebody who is there to sniff out bullshit, right? Like he's there to call bullshit on things.
The one thing I was making fun of is the freelance insurance investigator.
Yeah. Well, position. I think because he's set up as that, he's like he's primed to think that everything is you know, is a fake, is a ruse, you know, is everyone's trying to pull something over on him. And so that allows the madness to continue for him to deny the madness for longer than like a normal person would. And I just think that is what gets at the feeling of insanity so well, is this feeling of like, okay, yes, I am seeing batshit things, but I'm going to maintain that this must be somebody pulling something over on me because it can't possibly be real. And then when that finally breaks, when he finally can't dismiss it anymore, you feel his character just collapse into chaos. And I think that's what makes the film such an effective portrayal of madness.
Apocalyptic madness. I want to read the quote for the end that I think is feels like a summation of this Apocalypse trilogy. But the quote is Sam Neill says at the end, "Every species can smell its own extinction. Last ones left won't have a pretty time of it. In 10 years, maybe less, human race will just be a bedtime story for their children, a myth, nothing more."
Sweet Lord. Yeah, and I think that's what, I mean, we keep coming back to this notion of dread. And dread is such a specific emotion. It's not, it's different than other things, and it's kind of hard to describe. But I think what gets at it with all these things, this notion that there are this feeling that everything that's tangible and understandable in the world can dissolve into something that's not just beyond humans, but beyond reality as one expects it.
Or that it's not tangible and understandable too. I have this pet theory. I don't even know if I've told you this, Keith, but whenever someone directs any other kind of genre and just suddenly puts a horror version onto it, like suddenly the sense of propulsion to it or stakes raise immediately. Like part of the reason I think the original Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings trilogy works is because Peter Jackson directs an epic like a horror movie, and Carpenter is a genre jumper. He still directs a lot of these horror movies with the sense of dread to them, so the stakes always rise. The stakes are always really intense in his movies, I think. And even except for maybe when he's being fun or something like Big Trouble in Little China.
There's some dread in that actually, but I was I don't want to go off on another tangent, but just some of the filmmaking thing. I don't know if it's in the script or it's John again, that the audacity. I had the chuckle. How many times his car goes back into the city? I mean, just you think, okay, third time, fourth time. I forgot how was there.
Well, there's that one sequence at the beginning where they first see the alley, and there's 3 dream fake outs in that.
Oh yeah.
He wakes up, and then the cop is right next to him, and like there's 3 times. He wakes up 3 times.
And I
remember the car thing specifically. I remember what you're saying, because I was thinking he can't possibly do it past 3 times, but he does do it at least 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, it's hilarious. It's wonderful. I mean, again, if you're in the spirit for it, you just love it. I love also. I thought it was. I had to laugh. I watched. I think I watched this for the first time during the pandemic, with the heat of the heart of the pandemic year, and but I stuck it in the other night, just watching some portions of it, and I just chuckled out loud with. He walks into the theater and he has a bucket of popcorn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you guys see the credit block on the poster?
Well, that it's the movie directed by John Carpenter.
Yeah, and I think Mike DeLuca wrote it too.
Well, that's okay. So this is the other thing that I bring to this movie that I absolutely adore. So I'm a huge Kurt Vonnegut fan, and there's a moment at the end of I had read almost all of his works, and one of the last works I saved that I hadn't read was Breakfast of Champions. And in that book, he's got this character that he has show up through multiple of his books.
Kilgore Trout.
Yeah, Kilgore Trout. Thank you. And at the very end of Breakfast of Champions, Kilgore Trout meets Vonnegut as his creator. And I remember Kilgore even asking why do you do these things to me? Why do you make me suffer through all these things? And it's been a while since I read the book. I can't remember exactly what Vonnegut says to him, but I remember feeling that was such a powerful thing. I mean, it's the closest you get to the notion of man meeting God. You meet your creator, you ask them what the fuck? Why is existence this way? And there's that feeling at the ending of this movie. I actually do think that while I do prefer The Thing overall as a movie, I do think that's Carpenter's masterpiece. I think this is the best ending he's ever done. Just that notion that this guy who doesn't know if he's a character in a book or not, he's trying to come to the realization of that. And finally, when he realizes that he is, that not only is he a character in a book, but he's he's a character in a movie that we've been watching this whole time, and it all kind of comes full circle. It's almost like it brings that same kind of full circle feeling of meeting his maker. And he just kind of accept that. That's what I love about his laugh at the end, is that he accepts that, fuck, I am a fictional character, and the person who has created me has decided to destroy my entire world. So all I can do is I can just sit here and laugh at the insanity of it all. And
watch it in a loop fashion.
And just watch. Yeah. And I think that there's something about that tableau that is hilarious and insanely depressing and haunting to me at the same time. That is, it works on so many levels for me because of that.
And it's offset by a laugh too, and the looping structures I think I agree with you. It's, I don't know. Prince of Darkness is a strong final image for me. Maybe not the ending itself, but the strong final image. But from a writing standpoint, this is the strongest ending of the 3.
Yeah.
But overall, do you think what do you think of some of the flawed films, Keith, that don't seem to work or don't hold up as tight?
So I mean, I love. Let's say, I really do think he has a 10 or 11 film miracle run where it's it's everything from. Dark Star I haven't seen in years, so I don't remember. I know that's his a student film of his. I don't even remember that much about it. But I just recently rewatched The Fog this year, and I thought that was great. And Precinct 13 is great. I don't know. I think they're all. I think where I start to fall off is. Oh fuck! I think. The first one that. Like I said, I just watched Memoirs of an Invisible Man, and I think it's actually a solid film. It's just not a Carpenter film. It's almost like it just belongs to somebody else. It belongs to Chevy Chase. It's not a film.
Well, it was his baby. I got a book here on Carpenter. I'll give a plug for Troy here. Assault on the System, the Nonconformist Cinema of John Carver by Troy Haworth. Haworth? Would you say Haworth?
You're the one that wants to get the plug.
But he talks about, he goes into great detail about how Chevy really nursed this thing and was really his project, and he really and he had the power on it, and John just kind of played along with him on that.
Yeah, because I know that was like Ivan Reitman was supposed to direct it for a while,
Right,
which
yeah.
actually it feels more like an Ivan Reitman film. It doesn't really feel like a Carpenter film at all. So I don't know. I would even say that that's like, I think that that's a solid film, and I even like have some love even for Village of the Damned, even though it's not a good film. I don't think I saw it when I was really young, and it's stuck in my mind a lot.
That's another one. That's another one I skipped. I have a really weird hole there where I skipped, and then I come back for Escape from L.A. and Vampires.
It's not. Village of the Damned is not, like I said, I don't necessarily recommend it. It's got some really haunting stuff in it, but as a whole, it doesn't really work as a movie.
We talked about this earlier off air, but what I mentioned earlier about the VHS mid ones, those are ones I need to rewatch. So like Vampire I saw in the theater, but I need to rewatch that. I need to rewatch Village of the Damned.
Well, I was going to say, I think Vampires is underrated. I actually quite like Vampires.
No, I kind of gotta love. It's again another one where I think it kind of peters out a little bit at the end.
Definitely. The ending is
kind of underwhelming. Whereas though, I remember being in having lunch with my friends on Saturday, and I had a variety, and they did the review of Vampires, and it opened a year before it came here in France. And I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds fantastic. Maybe Carpenter, I was thinking, and so I was really just geared up for it. And it didn't show for a year. And then that opening sequence, you got, it's Leone, Peckinpah, Western, James Woods at top, grade James Woods. I just thought, oh my gosh, this is just fantastic. And then it kind of peters out a little bit at the end. But
it does peter out. Yeah.
But overall, I mean, there's enough in there that we recommend it. Yeah.
I will say with Vampires, what I love about it is the mythology that he builds around them is great. Like them coming out of the ground, like sleeping in the ground at night is amazing. The biggest problem with Vampires is the ending, and then the characters kind of, I mean, like Daniel Baldwin, like I don't know what's going on with that character. Like his relationship with the woman who plays Laura Palmer, I don't remember her name.
Shirley.
But yeah,
like I have forgotten so much about this movie.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is like the characters are kind of non-existent. They're not really, and they're not interesting in the way that like the characters in The Thing are, even though they don't have much, characterization. They're just interesting people. There's something about the characters in this that are kind of funky, and I don't know. And it does peter out. But the mythology, and again, I think the mythology that he builds in almost all of his films is really strong and always interesting. The mythology in Vampires is interesting, and it works to an extent, but the ending kind of peters out. I will say where he starts to fall off for me, like I really think Escape from LA doesn't do it for me at all.
I have not heard anybody be happy with that, and it seemed like and it's one of those, gosh, why do they do so many sequels that just seem like a remake as opposed to being actually extending?
Mm-hmm.
And then you had all this money and resources and actors, and then you had Kurt Russell back as a character. We love Snake Plissken; it's a great character, and it just kind of what? And then, but guess what? Our friend Lucas watched it recently. He went in and bought the collector's edition just to keep his set, and he said, "You know what? I kind of liked it this time."
You know what? I reread a review. Someone said that, like, it's Steve Buscemi's like kind of just with Snake Plissken. I mean, that's something. I mean, like,
well, it's Pam Grier and Bruce Camp. I
was actually probably the perfect person.
Peter
to watch.
Fonda.
I was the perfect person to watch that movie just because I had never seen Escape from New York. I
there
saw
you
Escape
go,
from LA first. In theory, I should.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think. Yeah, I mean, the fact that it is just pretty much a straight remake hurts it a lot, because Escape from New York is so. It's just a better version of it. So if you come into Escape from LA first, I think there's a lot to there is stuff to take from it. There's good stuff. I actually love the sequence where they're in Hollywood and they have like the plastic surgeon people.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a great little sequence. The CGI in there,
it's not aged well.
Just it hurts it. It's hard for me to watch.
I don't think it was strong CGI at the time, but like it is. Although I do remember the Sci-Fi Channel specials about the earthquake sequence.
It's like watching that kind of CGI, that early 90s CGI, where it's like it looks like a bad. it's not even it's like PlayStation 1 game or something like that, like a cutscene from like it's just it's rough to watch.
We were complaining about
Um,
the Sci-Fi Channel Dune on our last episode that suffers from that.
oh yeah, no, but I will say like but that's where that one was rough for me. And yeah, like I said, Ghost from Mars, I really didn't find any enjoyment in that movie. I think it was just, I don't know what was going on in that film. And I don't know, that one was, and like I said, I haven't seen The Ward yet. I'm kind of dreading it. It sort of sucks that like this guy who I think has just had like one of the strongest runs in film history, all of a sudden just kind of peters out in the 90s and 2000s.
I will give it to him. He does seem happy right now, doing scores with his son. I mean, I wish he had money. I wish he had respect. I wish he had respect from the people who are making paying for movies. But
I want to go back to his run, and I do want to put this in. I Big Trouble in Little China. It's one of my favorites, and I think I love the fact. And Keith, I don't know if this is something that you thought of or keyed into. I love the fact, so many of the Hong Kong films, and especially even the ones from the 80s, they could do all this magical leaping around and crazy stuff, and there's just that's just part of the genre over there. And I love the fact that Carpenter gives it a reason for us dumb Americans that can't swallow that kind of fun, that you take a potion to do that stuff. Because I thought, oh, that's very clever. Again, thinking it through, and it might be Richter that did that, but
yeah.
And apparently Richter and Carpenter got along very well, working that script over on that one.
I also love that the potion is the only reason why. Oh my God, what is Kurt Russell's character's name?
Jack
Burton.
Jack Burton, thank you. Is the only reason why Jack Burton succeeds at anything.
Oh yeah, they purposely want to make the hero the goof of the movie.
Yeah.
And that studio was Barry Diller wasn't really happy with that. And that's what they put that book in on the beginning and the end, just kind of to kind of tamper that a little bit. Like, he is legendary. He's a legendary guy, but he's kind of a big goofball.
No, that's what I think. I had been nervous about revisiting that film because I'm like, there was such a fetishization of like Asian cultures in the 80s and so many of those movies. Like, I'm just like, oh God, how is this going to hold up? But you watch it, and even with all the fantasy and like insane magic they throw into the culture and stuff like that, I think what makes it hold up so well is that the macho, bravado white guy is the least capable person in the whole. Like, I just love that he's like, of course, I'm the center of this. I'm the protagonist. I'm the action hero. And everyone's like, yeah. Just please get out of our way. You keep making things worse. I think that the fact that is the case is what makes that film still hold up so well today, and it doesn't fall in the same trappings that so many Hollywood films fell in during that time.
The Kim Cattrall character, I thought was she's so fun a lot, and that shows a good actress. She could be in the right medium, in the right.
And Kim Cattrall never seemed like to have like the
career that did really
career she deserved.
Yeah, and she's kind of a Howard Hawks woman in that in a way. The quick snap.
That's a good point.
Yeah, wisecracks and very snappy, like Rosalind Russell and his girl Friday.
Yeah.
Well, I just want it was interesting. By being the older guy here, and I was telling Shane before we started recording about how my perspective at one time we were just like there was that whole group of Carpenter, Landis, Cronenberg, and Romero, all just kind of coming out at the same time, and they were all these and to see how and we were all excited about it. And Cinefantastique magazine and Starlog and all this stuff. We were just like Fangoria, and we were just all eating that stuff up. And then something happened later. I guess the new guys came along or something, and I kind of fell off a little bit.
It bugs me even more because it seems, I mean, I guess you can look at short-term reading of box office receipts and just the studio heads at given time, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of logic into why Carpenter's career, like, there's a parallel I was thinking of. He started out earlier, but if you look at when I was started paying attention to this stuff, would have been the early 90s, him and like Carpenter probably has the same career as De Palma, and De Palma then ends the '90s on a big budget wave. Like, it's just why didn't he get more big budget chances? Is my point.
And I always kind of thought you would not be a Carpenter fan.
And for the longest time, I wasn't,
because you're not the most loving of the exploitation era a corner of cinema, and he
there's just so much good fucking filmmaking in Carpenter stuff, and it's and like I was saying earlier, Carpenter frame, but the same there's something about that anamorphic widescreen that, like, there's a lot of art and poetry going into it.
I will say I'm sorry that I'm late to the game on Prince of Darkness and Mouth of Madness now. I will say that. I will admit that.
Oh, I wish that's heartwarming. Like, because I kind of brought you in. You were supposed to be a little bit the skeptic. That's great.
But I was getting all my Carpenter discs together, and I want to go to Shop Factory and finish off the collector's item.
You know what I have upstairs to watch after we're done recording this, Keith? Big Trouble in Little China. I haven't.
Big Trouble in Little China.
I've seen that as a movie, as the ending I saw with my cousins a lot, but like all the way through, I'm still not sure I've ever watched.
And again, the little throwaways that Carpenter does in all his films, I guess. Now I'm starting to see this a lot now. That really weird creature ball floating head just comes floating in the sewer, and you just and then it just goes out, and you're just like, what the heck was that?
Well, that's the magic of that movie. All those little things that, like, again, don't entirely make sense. I mean, of course, like, and then the famous thing of the guy blowing up at the end. Good God. Like, it's just like, it's a perfect, I mean, that movie's even more fun to sit around and like watch with like friends and
right.
drinking
Yes.
and stuff like that. Man, it's just a blast. I will say, so the other reason that's made me like, this year, I've even started to love Carpenter even more than I normally did, because I've been watching them with Allie.
Your wife,
because
Allie.
I was basically like, you watch The Thing, it's the scariest one out there. Let's try we watched The Fog together, and we watched Christine together, and I'm gonna try to get her to watch Starman. Obviously, Starman's not scary.
Starman, I really want to hear how she reacts to Starman.
Yeah, because I'm like, Starman, everyone, it's like, it's just a great movie, like everyone loves it, and it's like, and yeah, it was just been such a blast. Like we had like she was terrified during The Fog. She didn't care for Christine as much. But The Fog, I think, like, she was just, it was one of those things that it's like, it's the perfect amount of scary and fun. And I think that's what I've been thinking about preparing for this talk with you guys. I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, why do I love Carpenter so much? And I do find his horror to be so fun. It's fun in the same way that I find like Paul Verhoeven films fun. And like, these films are like, they're both, because both of them are auteurs. And obviously Verhoeven not really working in the horror genre, but they both are kind of like, they have the schlocky kind of element to them, but they also have a lot.
They seem like they're having fun doing what they do.
Yeah, and they're having a fun time. The movies are fun, but they're telling deeper things. They're having deeper ideas in there.
Little subversive. They like to sneak in a little subversive. I think, and a little twinkle in their eye. Say, hey, I think
So there's something about these films that all like those guys' filmographies kind of line up for me. Is in the same way George Miller I also kind of throw in there too, like with the Mad Maxes and stuff. Like there's something about these things that are just like, they're great filmmaking and they're really
George
fun.
Miller's Twilight Zone contribution, his Nightmare at 20,000 feet, or is that what it is?
Yeah, it's just like, it's good filmmaking, people having fun doing it.
I just want to kind of end the fact that, why do you think it still seems to be a stigma on John Carpenter, like he's over here, he's not with the Coppola and Spielberg and
any of the movie brats, or even the genre ones.
He doesn't get the consideration and the love of being over there. He's like, oh, he's a cult guy, or he's over in this corner, or he does, he's a genre guy. But it shouldn't.
You think, like, at the very least, The Thing alone would prop him up to that.
Should he be in that group? Should he be in it with Fincher and Anderson and those guys, or does he should be over here by himself, or does he deserve?
Well, is it a generational thing of like, where is he at compared to Cronenberg?
I see. Cronenberg kind of went mainstream, by the end of
he just stopped doing horror. Never mainstream, but he's just stopped doing horror.
Well, yeah.
But he does a version of it now.
But it's still there, but it's, I don't know. And of course, Romero's a whole other story too. But Keith, do you sense that he's still kind of like separated from the big circle, or did he deserve it?
Definitely. I mean, I feel like
Is it the budget? Is the act he doesn't use big actors, or
well, I think it's because of this thing. I mean, I think it's because of the thing about him doing like ostensibly his films on the surface are um like the deeper themes are kind of buried underneath the genre elements. Like Cronenberg is different because like he actually I think delves deeper into the or especially like with his later films, he goes deeper into the art house with like horror elements where Carpenter really is just like, I'm going to tell you a good story, like in a good way.
So
at a
you're-
campfire?
And the deeper
Right?
themes
So
are
you're
underneath.
saying he's getting punished for telling a good story, basically.
I think he, yeah, well, by the people, by the those who elevate people to the authorship, yes, and because most of his successes, I think, are almost all in the genre world. I mean, every guy you just mentioned have successes outside of the. I mean, Cronenberg.
Well,
he started
you're going to get to Starman soon, so.
Well, no, but I know, but like, and I think that's great. But I think I mean, maybe that's an outlier. I don't know why. I don't entirely know why, but I will say, I think when you look at someone like Cronenberg or, I mean, obviously you got things like Coppola and Scorsese. They're doing all sorts of things, and they have such a distinctive style. But they've all left. They will leave genre or come back to genre. I mean, Cronenberg's completely left genre and then like never came back to it.
And Raimi almost kind of left in a way, almost.
Yeah.
But he did the Oz movie.
I mean, I don't think
And Drag Me
Raimi's
to
in
Hell.
that circle, though. I wouldn't say Raimi or Romero. I mean, Romero and Carpenter are kind of in the same boat, where like I think everyone looks into are looked at as genre.
I think Raimi had much. I mean, Raimi's whole thing was that being a studio guy, he was where his reputation was maybe diminished. But like from a filmmaking standpoint, everyone always gave him chops. Where that like people were not giving Carpenter. We're not giving Carpenter. I think, don't you, Ted?
No, I think I mean, yeah, that's a good point. I haven't thought about that. I think Raimi gets more love than Carpenter in some ways, in a weird way, and I don't know why. You know why that is.
Well, let's let this podcast be something that is fighting that perception. Keith Fraase, thank you for doing the podcast. Ted, as always.
Yeah, I came and I was going to choose some bubble gum, but I'm all out.
The one Carpenter movie we didn't talk about barely at all through this, you managed to ref at the very end. Good on you, Ted. Good on you. Thanks, Keith.
No, my pleasure. I'm always happy to come on and talk about Carpenter any time of the day.